weekend, a bantamweight showcase fight, and a Vic Maynard and Sean Shelby said, let's get funky and let Craig and Matt Allen of Fight Night Picks make fights. We'd make fights like Ricky Simón versus Jack Shore.
We'd put them on the main card, though, because that's where this fight belongs.
More so than Lauren Murphy and Miesha Tate, but that's neither here nor there. When you look at this fight, man, I mean, for Ricky Simón, former LFA champ at bantamweight, he spent time at featherweight at parts of his career. But you look at this guy, I mean, he's a guy out of Vancouver, Washington, adjacent to Portland, Oregon, trains out of ATT in Portland. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Fabiano Scherner. And if you look at Simón, he wrestled in high school, had plans of wrestling in college, and then went, screw that, I'm going to become an MMA fighter. Pretty good decision by Ricky Simón. And you look at his overall career arc and the guys that he's trained with, like ATT Portland, Vince Morales, a main staple. And I know Morales has moved his camp since down to Syndicate, but both guys, they're cousins, they hang out, and Morales is helping Simón for this camp. Another guy that's at that camp and at that gym in Portland is a guy like Journey Newsom, who has nukes in his hands and jiu-jitsu that you never get to see, but it is very, very impressive. And for Ricky Simón, he's had a wild career. He's had great opportunities. He had a UFC debut victory over Merab Dvalishvili, but if you do look at it for Ricky Simón, and you consider the grapplers that are in this overall division, this is a point that I wanted to make. He is second all-time in bantamweight history with the most takedowns. 35 takedowns in his short UFC career. Merab Dvalishvili's number one was 50, but it's just incredible to see that out of Simón. And you look at the blip on the radar, the loss and his big marquee opportunity to Rob Font, the loss to Uriah Faber that he had, and you might have thought, geez, this guy's never going to pan out. But for Ricky Simón, 4-fight win streak, beats Ray Borg with his wrestling, goes out there and beats Gaetano Parello and made it look easy because Gaetano Parello was a not ready for primetime player like on Saturday Night Live in the 90s. He beat Brian Kelleher and just beat him pillar to post. His hands look crisp in that fight. And his last time out against Rafael Assunção, great head kicks and great boxing in that one too. Cutting very good angles, really doing a good job of cutting the cage. And when you watch Ricky Simón fights, great core movement and great head movement and a really hard guy to pin down and hit. Really good things that he's been able to add to his tool set as his career's gone on. Just the fact that he's not just a pure wrestler, he can mix everything together. And for Jack Shore, the hottest prospect out of Wales since his training partner Brett Johns. But if you look at it for Shore, former Cage Warriors bantamweight champ, Brett Johns, third all-time UFC bantamweight history in takedown attempts, so that's pretty good. Takedowns landed. But for sure, since he won that title over with Cage Warriors, he had a performance of the night win in his UFC debut against Noeline Hernandez, but they stepped him up in competition. His last time out against Timur Valiev, dropped him a couple of times, got taken down by Valiev, but in that fight, listen, Mark Goddard probably could have ended that a couple of different times. For sure, really added everything together. Nice tall striker for this division. Crisp hands, doesn't really land a ton of volume, but the nice thing about Shore is he makes you think with the low kicks to mix in his level changes, loves to get the back, and out of his overall submission wins, Matt, 8 submission wins, 7 of them by rear naked choke. Very much a position over submission guy, but he will grapple to take that back and choke you out. And Jack Shore, Ricky Simón, they're just both a pleasure to watch in the cage.
You've really broken most of the stuff down. I don't really know where to begin.
I watched a ton of tape for this one. So much tape.
So did I. This is the thing. I've been more impressed with Jack Shore as an MMA prospect. I will say that right now. Because for Ricky...
Is that just because of the Uriah Faber loss?
No, it's not. Ricky Simón, there's a double-edged sword for having great takedowns and having a volume of takedowns like Ricky Simón's. It means you need those takedowns to win your MMA fights no matter what the case is. And yes, his hands did look a lot better against Rafael Assunção his last time out, but Assunção wasn't really prime Assunção at that time. It's like when Joe Calzaghe beat Roy Jones Jr. to the end of his career. He beat him, but it wasn't Roy Jones Jr. It wasn't Superman from the early 2000s. And for Simón, I do think his striking did look like it took a level up in his last performance, but there is a little part of me in the back of my head that says, okay, well, it was over Rafael Assunção, who has taken a lot of damage throughout his career. And on the flip side, Jack Shore against Timur Valiev had a very, very tough fight until the last round of that fight. He was getting taken down. He looked tired, if we're being honest, but he found a way to fight through that adversity against a really good fighter, too, and that was really impressive. It's one of those performances that takes a guy from being a prospect and could make him a contender. But that's why this fight against Ricky Simón is so interesting, because we have seen Jack Shore get taken down, not get controlled up until this point, and that's where I do think Ricky Simón can have a lot of success. If he's able to get Jack Shore down, use some of his odd takedowns himself, go for some of those ankle picks, go for some of those high body takedowns, I do think he can give Jack Shore quite a bit of trouble with those, and This is something else that I've been thinking of too. In my mind's eye, I know on Tapology it has them at about the exact same size. I do think Ricky Simón is going to have somewhat of a physicality advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing. Like, I watch these Ricky Simón fights, and in Jack Shore's last fight against Timur Valiev, they bill Valiev as 5'6", but, like, he's not a big bantamweight. Like, he's just a bantamweight. When I look at Ricky Simón, the guy cuts weight, and you see the picture in front of you, like, he's muscled up, which his cardio doesn't really fall off a cliff as these fights go on, but Jack Shore, tall, long for the division as well.
But he does get stronger as these fights go on. I think that's going to be really interesting because by the time the third round comes, will regular Ricky Simón be able to beat third round Jack Shore, who is going to go to the bottom of the tank, who is going to go for the finish? And that is the big difference between these guys. If there's a finish in this fight, I can almost guarantee I'm not going to Charles Barkley hit the red button, but it's more than likely going to be because Jack Shore is finishing Ricky Simón and not the other way around. Shore has shown a very good chin. He has phenomenal cardio, and he has really good submission defense too, to the point where I do favor him in a lot of these grappling sequences because for Simón, I think he relies on his pure wrestling more than his grappling after the fact. When you do have those really high numbers, even think about Merab Dvalishvili. He gets you down, you kind of work your way back up to your base, and then he takes your soul and takes you down again. That's really disheartening for a lot of fighters to go through because you get so close to getting back up to your feet, and then you're right back down, rinse and repeat. Jack Shore's not going to care about any of that, though. He's going to be able to have his own success in some of the grappling throughout this fight, and I think that's his small X factor that he can take advantage of. If he can make this a mixed martial arts fight and not just go in there wrestling with a guy like Ricky Simón, I think he can have a lot of success. The problem is, if he does get into one of those wrestling matches with a guy like Simón and he's not doing enough damage himself, I could see Simón just being able to control these 3 rounds enough with his own dominance and with his own physicality with the clinch up against the cage, because if he is going to get Jack Shore up against the cage, I'm not sure if he'll be able to take him down from that position, but it's just going to be a time where Shore's not really doing anything himself.
And we saw Simón have a lot of success there against Brian Kelleher, and even in that Kelleher fight, you saw a little bit of a level up in the striking of Ricky Simón. Obviously a great win over Sunsao. We all know Sunsao, at one point, he was due some title shots, and he wasn't able to cash that money in the bank. But for Simón, being able to beat a guy like that, it's impressive. You look at these guys, they're both takedown machines. Ricky Simón averages 6.76 per 15 minutes. For Jack Shore, 4.13, but he very much is a strike to grapple guy, where Ricky Simón is a strike a little bit to grapple a lot of it. So when I do look at this one, my big notes were, again, Shore stands a lot taller than Ricky Simón. Ricky Simón cuts more angles than Jack Shore, but for sure, when you compare these two guys striking-wise, Ricky Simón, it's a lot of lead left hooks. He will throw the jab out there. Shore's going to throw a lot more leg kicks than Ricky Simón will. And for Simón, he throws a lot of lead left high kicks, which is kind of wild. They land, they give a different look to it, but he can kind of throw them because he hasn't really had to worry about the striking of his opponents in his last number of fights, so it just kind of opened up that extra level to his game. But for Jack Shore, very accurate down the pocket boxing, and he has gotten better at that. One aspect as his career's gone on, 12-0 as an amateur, IMMAF European champion, 16-0 as a pro. He's never tasted defeat in MMA. Obviously, for Ricky Simón, came in on Season 1 of Dana White's Contender Series 2017, won a split decision. They said go get some leveling up. He was able to get that done over with LFA, winning the belts, beating Merab, and the rest is history. We have a look at the odds in this fight. They open very closely. Shore minus 115, Simón minus 105. Now Shore is a bigger favorite. Minus 162 is the average on best fight odds. For Simón, plus 133. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt, surprise to us, they are to you. Jack Shore is a super prospect. He doesn't have any losses, and the fans at Fight Night Picks love him. So I'm going to say over under 70% Shore.
I'll say over.
I'm going to say over. 74% Jack Shore on 708 total votes. 83% by decision. For the 26% that have Ricky Simón, 83% by decision. So the fans are expecting a decision over on Tapology. I also expect a decision. It's hard to beat Ricky Simón by finish. Old man Uriah Faber did it. That was kind of a weird one. And for Jack Shore, we've seen him take into the deep waters against some wrestlers. Obviously, he had that fight against pure American wrestler Hunter Azure, former UFC's own. But since then, yeah, it's been a mixed bag, and we've seen some growth from Shore as well. So I can't wait for this fight. It's one of my top fights on this card. But what's the pick here?
It is an interesting fight because I think Jack Shore is going to have a really hard time getting off his own offense with an opponent like Ricky Simone who can just go chest to chest with you, and that negates a lot of your own offense. The problem is, for some reason, I was thinking about mouse traps while you were talking, and there's like the regular old ones that just have like the wire, right? And then I remember going to our grandparents, they'd have like the really mean ones that look like a T-Rex mouth. Jack Shore is the T-Rex version of what Ricky Simone is as a regular mouse trap. Like, they do a lot of the same things well. The difference is, Shore has a lot more power behind his shots. He does have more of a submission mind when he comes to his own grappling. So for those reasons, I do think he's more likely to damage Ricky Simone. But I will say this, Ricky Simone could out-control Jack Shore, so that does leave an opportunity for him to win a decision. But I'm still going to go with the guy who I think could do the most damage in the fight.
You look at Jack Shore in his last fight, he had the 2 knockdowns against Timur Valiev. He got out-wrestled at the start of the first round, the end of the first round. Valiev just kind of got close to him and like almost pushed him over and landed on top. And then as the fight went on, he kept going for takedowns. He was successful with one more. But for sure, we obviously saw him damaging Valiev. I think Valiev is a good fighter, but he's been hot and cold in the UFC. I don't know if we got PFL level Valiev in the UFC. I know he had that great fight against Barcelos. I like the level up from Ricky Simone. I like the fact that he cuts angles, he cuts the cage, he utilizes offensive wrestling. He can dictate the pace with which he can control these takedowns, and I think he's going to push Jack Shore up behind the black line. I'm eager to see if Shore can strike off the back foot in this fight, because I think that's going to be a big key. But I do have Simone here. I think it's going to be a great fight, though.
I think it will be, but again, Ricky Simone has to do something on the feet to get that respect to move his opponent backwards. I don't think Jack Shore is going to be afraid to move backwards with a guy like Ricky Simone, who isn't really known for his own power in his hands. And I really do think that your opponent has to respect you for them to just be willing to give up all that space. So I think Jack Shore is going to be the one moving forward. I know at some points he's going to have to defensive takedowns, but I do really like his grappling once it does hit the mat. I know sometimes he can be defensive, but the second he gets on top of his opponent, he can really hurt his opponent, whereas he's so good defensively off of his back that normally it can't be said the same the other way. So I do like Jack Shore in this fight, but this is the most important fight of his career by far. Timur Valiev is a good win to get people convinced that you could be one of those uber prospects, but Ricky Simone gets you into the rankings, and it's one of those opponents who, okay, you beat Ricky Simone, well, you're never getting an easy fight from here on out. So Shore better be ready, and he better be sure that he has taken that big level up before he does beat a guy like Ricky Simone, because it's going to be tough fight after tough fight from this point on.
Ricky Simone, your 11th ranked bantamweight. I happen to get the win. Matt going with the 14th ranked favorite, who is Jack Shore. His nickname is Tank, and a great opportunity to get a win coming up this weekend. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Big time fight card coming up this weekend, including a featherweight marquee matchup between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez that you're not going to want to miss. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.